Welcome to the first of two nights of presentations by this year's CPC applicants. We'll get to the meat of the meeting in a couple of minutes. I want to ask anybody on the committee if they have any announcements to make. No? Okay. And then we need to vote on the October 9th meeting minutes. Did anybody want to make a motion to?
I have one edit.
Okay.
Your Canterbury Street Cemetery, Andrea Young reported that they, I just think we should say the town.
The town, okay.
Rather than they. Although everyone knows who Andrea is. But.
Other edits? Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of October 9th, 2019. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Okay, so as I said, this is the first of two nights of presentations. We have 10 applications this year, so 5 people are going to go each night. Just a couple of notes up front. One is just housekeeping. If you feel you need to converse during the presentations or at any point of the discussion, I would appreciate it if you would go out into the hall. I know sometimes you do need to confer with somebody sitting next to you, but it's distracting, and it would be better to just write a note or step outside if you need to talk. The other thing I want to mention for everybody in the room as well as for everybody at home is that the total asks this year are about $5,400,000. We have about $1,700,000 to give out, minus close to $500,000 because we're still paying off debt on the Laner land and on the Historical Society's Heritage Museum. So we have just a little over $1.2 million to give out on asks of, as I said, a little over $5 million. Okay, and with that, we'll start with the first presentation. Everybody gets about 10 minutes to present, and then we have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions and comments from the committee and any questions and comments from the audience. Any questions? Great. Okay, so first up is the Benjamin Lincoln House purchased by the Hingham's Historical Society. And Deirdre Anderson, I think you're going to present.
No, actually, Paula Bagger. I'm president of the Historical Society, and as you say, next to me is Deirdre Anderson, our executive director. Thank you for the opportunity to present our application for 2020 community preservation funding. The Benjamin Lincoln House is located in the heart of one of the most historic districts of one of America's most historic towns. It is a National Historic Landmark, our nation's designation for properties of exceptional historic significance. Remarkably, the town of Hingham has 2 National Historic Landmarks, the other being Old Ship Church. The Lincoln family and its descendants have owned and occupied this house for almost 375 years. They have been such wonderful stewards of the house and of the legacy, and so deeply committed to the idea that it is part of the fabric of our community that perhaps we have come to take it for granted. But things change, and this past spring, the Benjamin Lincoln House went on the market for the first time ever. So tonight, we are here to ask the community to support us in the opportunity of a lifetime, or as I think someone said at one of the last meetings, of multiple lifetimes. It is a big opportunity, and we want this CPC application to catalyze some big thinking by all of us about the Benjamin Lincoln House and what it means to our town. I won't go through all of the history here, particularly because we have a trifold being passed around, but I just wanted to comment that as we are starting to roll out our campaign on this project, it's been so nice to see the people of Hingham reacting with pride when many of them learn that the man on that white horse in the iconic painting in the Capitol Rotunda is Hingham's own Benjamin Lincoln, born, lived, and died in a gray house off Fountain Square. So Lincoln's contributions, military contributions, might be enough to justify preserving his home, but there's also the house itself to consider. On my slide, I've placed the date 1664 in brackets because we're waiting to hear from a group of architectural historians who have made multiple trips to Hingham this summer and fall to study and perform scientific dating tests on the house. And their interest in the house deepens every time they come back. It is impeccably preserved, and much as the general left it. From the Georgian renovations to the facade that he himself supervised, to a rare and untouched dairy room in the back lean-to, to the attic room of the general's coachman, Robert, and we are told that this may be the best preserved quarters of an 18th century African American in New England. It's almost a unique vehicle for all of us to teach and learn about life upstairs and downstairs in colonial America. The owners have agreed to sell the property to the Hingham Historical Society for $972,000, its assessed value. If the society acquires the house, the owners will donate a long list of the house's historically significant artifacts and furnishings, including, as pictured on the slide, the general's desk and corner chair. Before it can take title to the property, the society will need to raise a $1 million endowment, which will generate income to pay for utilities, routine maintenance, and annual operating costs of the property. The society is committed to raise the endowment and is asking the CPC to fund the purchase price. To give us time to raise the purchase price and endowment, the owners have agreed to take the house off the market until June of 2020. We have just last month launched our private phase of fundraising, and we have raised about 1/3 of the endowment. The public fundraising phase will start in January, and if all goes well, our target acquisition date is summer of 2020. Once we close on the property, we will be in a position to welcome the public almost immediately. CPC has been generous to the society in the past. But each time we have come before CPC, we have brought it projects worthy of the expenditure of community preservation funds. And each time we have provided the town significant value for its money. In 2013, you awarded, as you just alluded to, the society $1.1 million for the Heritage Museum. The society raised $400,000 in other grants and $1.7 million in private fundraising. As will be the case here, the CPC commitment to the Heritage Museum was the catalyst for our success in private fundraising. But the return on investment is not just our success in matching your awards with grants and other fundraising. We provide the town with continuing tangible benefits. Since the Heritage Museum opened in 2017, we have served as the town's de facto visitor center. We have actively partnered with the schools. Over 600 kids came through the Heritage Museum on tours this year. We've collaborated with the high school on National History Day and a high school internship program. We have developed curricula for the public schools around our exhibitions, and we have provided in-service programming for teachers. We have planned and implemented popular educational programming, such as this year's sold-out Waves of Change lecture series. We have opened our building to numerous civic organizations and work cooperatively with them on their programming. And we hold open research hours in our archives for anyone that wants to learn more about their family, their home, or Hingham history in general. And the same goes for the Old Ordinary. Over the last 2 cycles, you have awarded the Society a combined $68,000 for our work on the 21 Lincoln Street campus. For our part, we have raised $180,000 in other grants for 21 Lincoln Street, and we just raised $18,000 for that property in a single weekend fundraiser. If we lose the opportunity to purchase the Benjamin Lincoln House, the town will be the worse for it. Buying the Benjamin Lincoln House will ensure that the property remains unchanged inside and out. It will ensure that the historical artifacts and furnishings remain on site. The owners will donate them to the society if the property is purchased. If not, they will be lost to the town forever. And it will ensure continuing public access to the property. The current owners open the property generously and frequently. There is no assurance that this will continue with future private ownership. In sum, the Historical Society is confident in its ability, first, to raise an endowment to ensure smooth, continued operation of the Benjamin Lincoln property in the public interest. Two, to preserve the house, land, and furnishings. And three, to offer future generations the same public access and high-quality programming that we now provide at the Heritage Museum and the Old Ordinary. This very unexpected opportunity has forced the Historical Society to move quickly and to think big to try and save a local treasure. And we're relying upon the community to help us to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, for that presentation. So any questions from my fellow committee members? Okay, I just have a couple.
Sure.
So you've raised about in the $300,000 range so far.
Yes.
Is that money movable to another column, or is it restricted just for the endowment?
I'd have to go gift by gift, but I would have to say that the lion's share of it certainly could be used for the combined project. And I guess I have to say to answer that question more fully, we consider it a single project, to acquire the house and to endow it. We're only going to purchase the house if we can be responsible stewards of it. And the way to be responsible stewards for it is to have an endowment. We've talked to numerous other organizations that accept historical buildings, trustees, Historic New England, organizations like that. They do not accept unendowed property. And in fact, that was part of the discussion that we had with the owners. They wanted to know how we could ensure that the house would be taken care of. So yes, one could move money back and forth between columns, but the need is still for essentially $2 million.
Okay, and then that was going to lead to my other question. How was the $1 million endowment decided on? Why wasn't it $2 million? Why wasn't it $500,000?
So we looked at a number of different things. We took as a rate of return 4%, which you see in the literature as one you can use. And what we did is we looked at the historical costs of utilities at the house. We looked about what we know, both historical maintenance at the house and also what we know from our extensive experience with maintaining a house of that age. And then we considered what we would need in terms of perhaps additional, stewardship in terms of a buildings and grounds person, what we would need to bulk out our ability at the society to take on a third building.
Okay.
That came out to about $40,000 a year, and so that's where $1 million comes from.
Gotcha.
I have a question. As we do with every CPC project, can you help us know and understand, and particularly the public since it's being televised, where are the opportunities for grants? Certainly something of this stature and this historical value must have an opportunity for grants. Can you help us understand where that might be possible?
Sure, quite a bit of research was done, and what we've discovered is that once we own the property, the ability to attract grants is it's fairly robust. There are any number of different places we can go to get grants, say for capital maintenance on the property, for programming at the property, for collections in the property. What does not appear to exist, except perhaps in this room, is the possibility of a grant to purchase.
Okay. And can you tell us the Historical Society's current endowment, or is it two separate endowments, one for the Heritage Museum and one for Old Ordinary?
we are, I mean, I think our current endowment's around $800,000-ish.
Yep,
Okay.
it's just under $1 million, and I think we
know.
manage all properties under one bank,
Gotcha.
one account. And we have, you've received our 990s for 2017 and 2018. The position that we're in this year is strong in terms of our cash balance. And I think that the most important metrics in terms of to give you confidence when this committee awarded the society $1.1 million for the renovation of the Hingham Heritage Museum in 2013, we were a fifth of what our current operating budget is. And the metrics we see in membership, in annual fundraising, in programming alone is, leaps and bounds over what it was 6 years ago. And so I feel, we've illustrated how, if you look at this as a value proposition, we're a great investment. And I just hope that the committee will see that. And we have experience in managing 350-year-old homes with the Old Ordinary, which the Society has managed since 1922. And at that point, with a strictly volunteer staff. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Deirdre.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments from the floor? Oh, Kevin.
If the CPC doesn't award the entire amount, do you have an alternative plan to secure sufficient funding to acquire the property?
Fundraising. Certainly not bluffing when I say that there do not appear to be any other grant opportunities that we have identified for the acquisition, or, when I say the endowment being routine operating overhead, people don't give out grants for that either. It's the above and beyond will be where the grants are.
And in terms of ensuring public access, if the society were to acquire the property, would it plan on charging a fee for anybody that wanted to go in, or would it be free access? And if so, what is the sense in terms of hours and time that it would be open to the public?
I think it's premature. We will do everything we can, as we do at our two current properties, to make them, to have them open not only regularly for visitors, but also for the schools and other things. We did not, how to put this, this is not part of our 5-year master plan. This is something that happened to us, and we're stepping forward. So we're starting to formulate plans for how we might run it, but it's by no means a set business plan at this point.
Has the society, there's 2 Benjamin Lincoln applications and very few dollars available for everyone. Has there been any discussion with the folks that are proposing the statute, or how those 2 projects should be considered by this committee? Because they're basically competing funds with all the other projects, and they're both Benjamin Lincoln projects.
We're in active discussions with the other project, and we presume that they will continue after tonight's presentations. Speaking for us, we have checked with Historic New England, that is the group that owns the restrictions on the property, and there would be no impediment to putting a statue on the property, and that is certainly one thing that we're willing to discuss with this committee and the other group and anyone else.
Jim, did you have a question?
Yeah, have you been any thought about having a resident caretaker? I think the Dillaway House, I know that's where, that's somebody that lives there in part of the house, but they keep it alive.
Right, and so we spoke to a number of other groups, Historic New England, the trustees, Audubon, and they don't do that as much anymore. And they were not, they certainly weren't persuading us in that direction. So no final decision has been made, but both groups, except the trustee said if it's a farm, they have somebody to do the farming.
Okay,
But
the complexities,
but it is.
might be a way to have a presence all the time.
Yeah, and so we haven't decided against it, but the advice we were getting seemed to be steering us away from that.
Can I just say I agree with everything you both have said tonight and think this is a great proposal for, a great and appropriate proposal for the CPC. And as Larry said earlier, this is really a matter of constrained finances. The only finance question that I have is really about this endowment and the commingling that endowment that you raise with the rest of the Historical Society's funds, and kind of what assurances would the town have that there would be, that since we would be the town would be major contributors, that endowment would be earmarked for that property.
I think no final decision has been made as to how the endowment will be handled, whether it will be restricted or not. Our fiduciary responsibility as the owner of buildings of this sort will ensure that we maintain the property in the correct way, and that's why we are raising the money to do so.
And you have a good track record, but people change, things change over time, and that's why I asked the question, not as out of mistrust.
I mean, I guess I can only say that we have been operating historic buildings in town for 97 years, and so far our track record is pretty good, and so I see no reason to think it won't continue into the
And
future.
thank you for doing that.
It's a good question, and it's a good answer, and this can be codified. So if the CPC voted to recommend money toward the purchase of the house, and the town voted for that at town meeting, the grant agreement between CPC and the Historical Society could specify things about the endowment and so on, and it would and then it's in writing and signed by both parties. So there's ways to seal things in.
We probably have to look into how that would actually be, what the right way for that to happen.
Right, but it could happen.
Yeah.
There are lawyers, even on this committee. Other questions? Anybody on the floor? Comments, questions?
I have one comment.
Can you come to a mic and say who you are? And
Melissa Tully, 29 Back River Road, and I might have missed it in the presentation, but this is one of the 2 National Historic Properties in landmarks in Hingham.
Listed in the presentation.
I missed it in the presentation. Old Ship Church is the other one.
You
This
missed
is
that.
like letting Old Ship go. We can't let it go. So I'm redundant, but it's okay. It was a good thing to say.
It's a good emphasis. Thank you. Anybody else? Great. Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much.
Next up is the Benjamin Lincoln Park and Statue.
Larry, I just want to say, we're going to pass out Paula's transcript of her remarks.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. And Bill Ramsey's going to be doing the presenting, and he's going to tell us where the proposed statue is going to go and all kinds of other important stuff.
There might be an easel, but maybe I can kind of set it like this. Why don't you sit here next to me? Maybe that'll work.
Bill, are you presenting or is Alec presenting?
I'm going to present. I'm going to have him sit next to me.
Okay. We're ready when you are.
Just
You have to, just one sec.
this is your one. This is your slide. You got it. Advance it on the right or left, all right?
Yeah, this moves it forward.
Right there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, good evening. Bill Ramsey, 55 North Street. I'm here with Alec McMillan. thrilled to be here again before the committee. We were here last year, as some of you may remember. We're here to talk tonight about our continuing efforts to dedicate a statue and park to Major General Benjamin Lincoln. You've already heard about some of the historical significance of Major Benjamin Lincoln, but I'll take you through where we are with this project and our current overview. Okay, the applicant team, obviously Alec and I, we've been working on this for approximately 2 years now. This initiative kind of was born through actually through a Facebook discussion. Steve Dempsey posted a picture of the general on Hingham Then and Now, and then Alec and I were going back and forth about, hey, wouldn't it be great to finally dedicate a statue to him? So I called him the next day and I said, hey, would you want to work on this with me? And I was thrilled when he said yes. So we've been at this now for about 2 years. When we started, we approached the Historical Commission about their input for the project, a location, thoughts, a design, and the commission was wonderful. They were very receptive, very supportive, and they've become very generous to us, and we're indebted to them for all of their help. We have with us also on our team Sevi Strekalowski. Obviously, he's a local name. You all know Sevi from his work in town. He's kind of given us a good vision for the initiative. He's also worked with the sculptress and with the design a little bit, and he's also been a great liaison between us and the property owner. The landowner is Matt Falconeri. He owns 6 Station Street, the building that is currently in progress. If you walk through the downtown area, you'll see that it's moving along in terms of the building coming along. And the sculptress we're working with is Susan Lowry. For those of you that don't know Susan, she's a nationally renowned sculptress. She's done quite a bit of work in Hingham. She did the statue at the library. She did the one at St. Paul's Church. And the most recent one she did the bust of a Medal of Honor recipient, Herbert Foss, at the shipyard. So she's done a lot of work in town. She knows the community very well. So I talked a little bit about the background for the project. When I spoke with Alex, we talked about some of the impediments to why this hasn't been done in the past, and he kind of pointed out to me that the location was a bit of an issue, trying to find a suitable location to have the project. Funding is obviously an issue with a project of this nature, and just general consensus on where he would be, what he would look like, things along that nature. So the overview of the current proposal now, so I kind of gave you some detail already, but when we did meet with the Historical Commission, we did walk around the downtown area, and we looked at a variety of different locations. We looked at locations throughout downtown. There are a lot of obstacles that came up while we couldn't put them in some of those areas. We thought it would be prominently located. We looked at the town common as a possible area, and some issues have come up where that might not be the best location. And then when Mr. Falconeri started the permitting for his project a couple of years ago, I approached him about maybe putting this on his development site. And initially he was receptive but not completely enthusiastic, but today I'm proud to say that he's very enthusiastic about it. And one of my updates tonight is we've kind of come a long way in terms of securing the location. So this is the proposed location. Sevi was nice enough to do a sketch of it. The statue is got it in the bottom right-hand corner. A better spot would be to look at the diagram I have on my makeshift easel over here. You can see what the actual building was going to look like. The statue would be located on that design where the bench is and the gentleman sitting on the bench. But the general will be standing, and I'll show you a sketch in a second. Gives you an idea of the site plan. The black dot is the proposed location for it. So it would be at this intersection of Station Street and North Street, back from the intersection and back from the street enough not to impede sight lines. And this is our new design. So we came last year with a design where the general would be up on a 2.5 to 3 foot pedestal. We've now reduced that down to him standing on the ground. Where he was going to stand at about 9 feet, he will now stand at about 7 feet. We've also kind of changed a little bit, like we were going to have him with the sword, obviously known for the acceptance of Cornwallis' sword at the Battle of Yorktown. the sculptor feels like this is a better representation. It does honor his military service through his uniform, but also, as you can see, there's a script in his hand and some other things that we're trying to honor his town service as well. But the current proposal is that he'll be standing on the ground. He'll be about a height of about 7 feet or so. And, some of the best news I have for you is that when we started this project 2 years ago, and I started talking with people, we were given an estimate of a budget that would be about $230,000. So after a tremendous amount of work over the last 2 months, I've been able to reduce the budget down to now about $170,000. We already have $75,000 committed toward this initiative. Mr. Falconeri has kindly, he's so excited about the project that he has very kindly agreed to do pro bono work with respect to the work around the construction, oversee the construction, oversee the design, the bricklaying, things like that. He's going to do all of that pro bono. That's an in-kind contribution of several thousand as well that's going to assist us. But we're currently at $170,000. So why this is significant is that if you were to generously act upon our request with what we currently have raised and what we are currently asking for is going to put us over the finish line, and we'll be able to get this project done within the next year or so. And that's all I have, unless you want to add anything else.
Well, I think that,
Alan, can you just take the mic?
oh, excuse me, yeah. I think you've described the process very well. It's taken several years of trying to bring together the various people who had ideas about this, including the Board of Selectmen and the members of the Historical Commission, and we all trooped around downtown. And there was originally the idea that it could be right on the park there where Abraham is. But I was among others who felt that that should stay Abraham's area there, where his statue is. It needs that whole space. So then looking around downtown for another location, we couldn't put it on the one place was along the tunnel cap, but that belongs to the MBTA, and so places that look like there's a couple of spots near the intersections where there are benches to sit on, which is fine, but something of this permanence wouldn't have fit there. So we walked around, and there were a number of people who were quite taken with this location, because I don't know about you, but I'm glad to see this building redone and fitting in with the other structures along that way, because for many years I've observed in the days when people drawn to downtown would be women coming to shop at Talbot's, and then their husbands wouldn't go into Talbot's, they'd want to wander around town. And I sat and watched this on more than one occasion. That people would walk down to this intersection, and they'd look across, and they'd say, well, that's the end. No, but they wouldn't walk, they could walk all the way to the harbor. And so we think having something of interest on that side of the intersection to draw people across and down to the harbor will help all the businesses along this area and the other activities, including some that are sponsored by the town at the harbor area. So then came the idea of how should he look? He's well known as a general, but his career here in Hingham far exceeded the number of years he spent as a general, and 30 plus years as town clerk and as selectman. And then in his long retirement after the war, after he spent a brief period of time in service in Washington, he lived back here in Hingham, and every morning he'd get up and walked around town and visited all the stores, and was really the mayor of Hingham in many ways. And so when he died, he had been a civilian for far more years than he was ever a military man, although that's his source of his fame nationally. And I had thought it might be a nice idea to have him dressed in civilian clothes rather than military clothes. And some people agreed, but the general sense is that he's General Benjamin Lincoln, and that's why he's our hero, and he should be in his uniform. And I was persuaded that that made some sense. Then we had the thought whether he should be standing or whether on this corner he could be sitting on a bench. And our sculptress, Mrs. Lurie, has done sculptures all over the East Coast and even in the Midwest. And she has done sculptures of people sitting on benches, so she had no objection to the statue being on a bench. You know, like you see in Boston, where you see a couple of those statues where you can go sit on the bench next to him, put your arm around him, and have your picture taken, or do a selfie or whatever. But that, again, some people like that idea, including me. Other people thought, well, no, he should be standing, and he should be as noble as we can make him. So the only remaining issue was to what age you should pick out for the statue. Because as he got along in years, he suffered an injury at Saratoga, I think, where he was forever afterwards, had one leg was two inches shorter than the other, and he walked with a cane or with crutches for the rest of his life. And this was before the Revolutionary War. So that the question is, what should he look like? Because in the later years, he put on, how shall we put it, a great deal of weight. He was a very rotund fellow as he walked around town. But to some people who felt, well, no, we should make him look a little more noble, a little more. So we maybe pick not a statue of when he was 75, but maybe a statue that was representing him how he looked when he was 55, when he had been in Hingham and in the war. So these were all the factors that went into the process of deciding what the statue would look like and where it would be. And Bill has explained the rest of the way we've gone through that. So that's how we wind up with this location, and that's how we wind up with the statue looking like the statue that you see. And I think he'll be rotund, but not quite as rotund as I would like to have him. But so we think it'll be something that little kids will love to go and stand next to and have their picture taken next to him, and it'll be something that will be patted on by people who are walking down to the harbor and back, and it will be a real addition to downtown Hingham and make this part of the town fit very well with the downtown area.
And having him younger and thinner helped my budget quite a bit too, because his waist was going to cost me a lot of money.
Questions from the committee? Okay, I have a number of questions. Some of them are procedural.
Sure.
So one of the things we talked about at the October 9th meeting is for us to even be able to take a vote on this, you'd have to have permission from the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Have you received that yet?
So first of all, I want to thank the committee for giving me more time to get that done. I know that you were talking about a deadline, and so thank you all for extending that deadline. So I've asked about it. We have a request for council to take action on it. We have done everything we can to create the condition for them, to allow them to take action on it. In terms of the landowner is 100% committed to it. He said, he would sign that easement now if he could.
Well, it's a two-point process. One is the Board of Selectmen
That's
has
correct.
to give you permission to say that they approve of you going forward for this if they get the easement, and then the second one is the signed easement.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've asked for status updates on that. They haven't taken action on it, but I will continue to ask for it. And I know that you mentioned a deadline maybe in January, but I'll continue to update you and let them know the immediacy of taking action on it. But I think the conditions are all set. So
Okay.
I agree with you. They would have to take positive action on it in the two-step process. So certainly trying to push that along as much as we can.
Yeah, I think I forget exactly when the vote it is, but it's mid-January, so it's about 2 months from now.
Okay.
Okay, and then another question is, I remember last year, there was discussion of, is CPC even allowed to give money for a
Yes.
statue? And I think it was decided that the answer is no, that a statue is not historic. But you said that you got some information that it is allowed under the CPA?
So it is. So when we first came up last year, Larry, you may remember, we were told that CPC is not allowed to fund statutes. So I actually looked at the CPC statute in detail, and the CPC statute talks about what a committee can fund. It doesn't exclude other areas of funding. So I took my argument to Alec, who did a lot of research on it, and also to Andrea, and we ultimately brought it to Town Council, Tom Coughlin, and he agreed with us, and he informed last year's chair, Carol Piles, and Carol Costello, and you may remember they talked about it on the record at one meeting where they said, actually, we can do this. Based on the information I've received from Attorney Coughlin, I feel pretty confident that if the committee was to act favorably, you can do that.
Okay. Two more questions.
Sure.
When you submitted the application this year, you said it was going to, the whole project was going to be $250, so it's nice to see it come down to $170. You said the Historic Commission had committed $75, and you were going to do $75 through private fundraising, and Alec had told us at the October 9th meeting that some of that money had already been pledged. So in my devious mind, I'm thinking, well, 75 from Historic Commission, 75 from private fundraising, you only need 20 more.
Well, so we're working on the private piece, and obviously, I know that's every CPC application. We're aware that the committee, wants applicants to do that. So we're working on that. In fact, I had a conversation just a couple days ago about a private fundraising initiative and getting that off the ground if we don't get the full amount. So we're ready to do that. And in terms of the pledge, we have an in-kind contribution, certainly from Mr. Falconeri, which is going to help us get there. We have received some donations from people around town. I don't think it's the $75,000 mark.
No.
I wish it was. If it was, I would leave.
Without even making an effort to solicit them, this one. But I know there are people, including myself,
Interested, yeah.
who plan to make a donation as soon as this thing gets rolling.
So I guess my answer to you is people are very interested. People have said we'd love to help. We'd love to donate some funds. I don't have concrete amounts or concrete pledges.
Follow up on that. What is the amount from the Historic Commission's fund?
75.
So there is 75 coming in guaranteed.
We have 75 already ready.
From the
committed.
Historic Commission.
Yes, they've been wonderful, and we very much appreciate their assistance and generosity.
And I have one last question. If a statue weren't put there, what would Mr. Falconeri do with the space?
It would just be the bench with the brick. It would look nice, but it would be as probably represented in that picture right there.
So the 170 is essentially for the statue?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Other questions, comments from anybody? Kevin?
I would love to see a statue, and I know you've been working on it for several years. Where I struggle, and maybe you can help answer this, is while you started this statute process before the Benjamin Lincoln House came on the market, to me there seems to be a question of that project is a lot more money, yours is a lot more modest ask, but if we have limited funds and we have limited time with that project, would it be prudent for this commission to ask you to defer for another year or two your project? Is there a reason why your project would need to go forward now if we have limited funds? How would you propose we address our limited funds and two competing Benjamin Lincoln projects?
First and foremost, Alec and I are extremely supportive of what the Historical Society is doing. In fact, I think it's wonderful. As Paula said, we've been talking about collaboration efforts, how we can best make this happen. And I mean, personally, I would love to see that house purchased for a lot of different reasons. I think Alec would agree with me. So we deferred last year, as you remember. So we had a pending application last year. We deferred for a variety of reasons I probably don't want to get into tonight, but we deferred last year. The biggest issue would probably be some of the Greenbush mitigation money and the dependency on use of that money within a certain time frame. So that would be a problem for us, potentially. And the fact that, every year we defer, we're kind of losing a little energy. I mean, we've got a lot of energy now, a lot of excitement now, but we did defer last year. We feel like we've come a long way in the past year with our budget reductions, with a complete commitment from Mr. Falconeri, with the commitment of the sculptress. I mean, a lot of the pieces have come together in the past year, and I don't want to lose that momentum. That being said, we are very supportive of what the Historical Society is doing. We want to see them succeed, and we want to help them succeed. So.
Thanks for that, Kevin. That question, Kevin, and I think everybody's been blindsided by the house. It's just nobody expected this, so it just brings something into the mix that wasn't anticipated.
Sure.
Other questions or comments? Okay, great. Thank you both
All right,
so
thanks
much.
for your time. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next up is the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund. Tim White and Britton DuBose, who's going to be presenting, or is it both of you?
Both of us, I'll start.
Okay, just wait 1 second for the flurry.
Sure.
Hi, Kevin. Good.
That's my clip. Is there a clip? Oh,
Yeah, right there. The one on the
So,
that button is the one that's supposed to.
thanks.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to stop talking so the presentation can begin. Great.
Good evening, folks. My name's Tim White. I'm the chair of the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust, and
And I'm Britton DuBose, member of the trust. And we're here tonight to provide a little bit of context regarding our ask that we've made to you. So, as many of you know, we've embarked in the past year around a creation of a housing plan. It's still being pulled together, and we're meeting with our constituents to get their insight. But I thought we could start our presentation just by giving a little bit of context around affordable housing in Hingham so that you can see the challenge that we're facing, the type of people who we hope to help, the impact of the limited affordable housing in Hingham. And we're going to just look at a few brief stats around the Lincoln School apartments, just as a bit of a case study, especially for a population that many don't associate with affordable housing, but absolutely is often part of the conversation. Okay, so I'm not going to go detail through detail on this, but as all of us likely know, there's very limited affordability remaining in the private housing market in Hingham and in the area that Hingham is part of. The average or the median cost of a single-family home is $813,000. It's $450,000 for condos. This is a bit of an eye chart, but the points that I want to take away here are that the median family income for our area that we're in is $113,000, around $113,000. The populations that you'll see here in the rows, the very low, extremely low, and low, and the columns going across are the numbers of people in a family. So if you take, for instance, the bottom line, this is the population that's of low income, a family of four. What does that mean? That means that their median income for a family of four is $89,000. So when you think about that population, it's many of our town employees, our teachers, et cetera. what does that actually mean when you break it down on a monthly basis? Again, a bit of an eye chart, I apologize for that. But, and again, this is all coming from the housing plan that we've been working on. So a bit of insight there. For, again, looking at the low-income population, making $89,000 on medium for a year, that breaks down to about $7,000 of disposable income per month. That population is typically spending anywhere between $2,000 and $3,700 a month on housing. So that $3,700, the high end of that range, is where they're spending almost 50% of their income on housing. So proportionally, that's a very large piece. And when that happens, which unfortunately we have a large population in that category, there's really domino impacts to their ability to take care of other factors in their life. So that's some of what Affordable Housing Trust is very focused on. So taking the Lincoln School Apartments as just a bit of a case study here, we looked at the last 12 move-ins over the last year. There's such high demand for this affordable housing that the average wait looking at those last 12 move-ins for space in Lincoln School Apartments is almost 3 years. Some have even waited more than 3.5 years. Our current wait list in Lincoln School Apartments, 56 people are waiting for a one-bedroom apartment, 7 are waiting for a 2-bedroom. So as you can see, it is available, but there are limited numbers, and it takes quite a while to actually get one of the few spots that exist. So that leads me to our ask of $878,000 this year, which is definitely the largest ask that we've had over the past few years. That's all in opportunity funding. We came to that number, seemingly random number, but with quite a lot of diligence, kind of adding up the different opportunities that we see, also commitments that we've made over time, and with the potential of them coming to fruition. So we have that detail that adds up to the 878. I just want to add, CPC is one of our primary sources, is almost our only source of funding. So that's why we're here. We don't have many other places to go. We're actually currently, if you look at the part of our limited budget that is in scope for CPC conversations, we're actually negative $143,000 because we've had to move some money around to take what we received last year and recently buy 2 units on Road Circle. So, and that is baked into the ask of the 878. So that 878, if we're able to do all of the things that led us to that number, would actually allow us to support 7 additional affordable housing units in Hingham and continue to support one that's not on the official list of affordable housing units in Hingham, but is currently occupied, the rest house that we're in partnership with Father Bill's on, and they recently purchased that in the last year or 2. So Tim, would you add anything?
Yeah, and just so you know, we do work to see whether we can get funding outside of the town. We presently have a grant application with the state to do some significant and necessary work for the Road Circle properties that we recently purchased. So it's always a challenge because there's a lot of competition out there for projects, and Hingham is frankly viewed as one of the more wealthy communities in the state, so we're not as needy as some other places it might be. But we put a good application in, and very optimistic that we'll receive some funding for that as well. That purchase, there aren't too many 2-family homes in Hingham, as you know, was ideal for the town, and we moved very quickly on it. And we moved very quickly on it because of you folks, because we have the opportunity funding available to us. Without that, we would not be able to put offers down on properties that come up unexpectedly. So it really is critical to us to continue obtain your support. And the number certainly is higher than we've asked for in the past, but and our our history, I think, has been good with you folks, that we've taken your money, we've turned it into good projects in the town. But what I will say is that the projects have been primarily small projects. The benefit of that is that we can put properties, affordable housing properties, sprinkled throughout the town, so they're not located in just one single place. We've got them on Beale Street, we're looking at Whiting Street, we're on Whiting Street, we're on
Cushing.
Road Circle, Cushing, thank you. So that's a great benefit. But on the other hand, as you saw up there on the screen, there is a desperate need for additional senior housing in town. And that's something that we would like to push forward over in our agenda over the next year. And with your assistance, we can do that.
The ask this year, so that's mostly for money to potentially buy new units, not to fix up units that have already been bought?
And that's not quite accurate, no, because Whiting's, for example, Cushing Street, we purchased that. There is one unit on Cushing Street. We are looking to create 2 units on Cushing Street.
Okay.
And that will cost us considerable amounts of money to do that. Right now, it's in the planning stage. We've got Cavanaro Consulting drawing up some plans for us to see the feasibility of putting a house in the back, probably with a shared driveway. We do think that, based upon what we've heard so far, that we have a good chance of success with that. So that's one example. Road Circle, again, there's no guarantee that we're going to get the grants. The grant we've asked for is about $170,000, because those properties need $170,000 to get them back on the market, to sell them to folks who qualify as under the affordable, and you need to have the property in good shape for them, because they're not going to be able to afford to bring it up to stuff themselves.
Yeah, it's basically that 878, it's a combination of supporting units that are in progress but not built in one case. Another one that we're dedicating some money, would like to dedicate some money to, that already exist around, seeing if we can make one into 2. The purchase or the renovation of one that we purchased recently with our funding from last year. Another one that would be completely new to our inventory. Actually, there's 2 that would be completely newer to our inventory, and then make up the difference that we're already in the hole for. That's essentially the big buckets.
Some not yet bought. Some
Right.
bought but not ready for prime time.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
Good question.
Other questions, comments?
I just have one question, and maybe you can help me understand and people at home. So with the units that are, currently being developed on Beale Street, and I understand we're not developing those, but obviously they're going to meet some needs of some affordable housing, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, at least the good news is that there are more units available for affordable housing. I understand we need to still do what we need to do, but I just want to understand, because I can only imagine how long the list is. And one of my questions is, I personally know of people who don't live in Hingham who are on the list in Hingham for affordable housing, just because this is where they work and they want to live. So how does that work for people who don't really understand? Obviously, just because they're teachers here doesn't mean they live here, but they'd like to live here and they meet criteria. So are there, do you get higher on the list because you work in the town, or you live here and you can't? How does it all work, so that we understand the need and how it?
Generally speaking, that you need to qualify by your income, okay? And Britton put up on the screen the numbers that you need to qualify. Beyond that, whether or not you can get we call it a local preference for Hingham residents, employees, we have been able to get that in the past. Whether we can get that in the future remains to be seen. It is something that is being debated on Beacon Hill. There are issues concerned regarding whether it's discriminatory because you don't have enough minorities on that list. Right now, you can still do it, but there certainly is no guarantee that next year you're going to be able to.
And then my next question is clearly, I mean, one of the issues that Hingham has is an aging population. And as people get older, not only does it get more and more difficult to perhaps stay in their home, but the affordability of a home that they may have been able to have at one point, tax-wise, becomes out of their reach. Are they given any preferential treatment in order to stay in town? Obviously, they're in a fixed income, so maybe their income, just because you have a house that's worth on the market in the millions of dollars doesn't mean that's what you paid for it. But tax rates keep going up. So I guess my question is, are they given any preferential treatment when their goal is to stay in town because they can no longer afford their own home?
I would say the answer is probably no, based upon the asset.
Just
Yeah.
so that, I don't think most people understand this.
Yeah. Initially, they only had an income restriction, but because it was being abused with folks that had significant assets, and then they were paying affordable
Okay, I
market
understand.
rates. So.
Okay, thank you.
And the trust doesn't decide who gets to live in the
No.
houses, right? That you guys come up with the properties and then the state.
Yes,
Yeah.
it goes into the state-run
Yes, yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we don't pick and choose. We just maintain the units.
Well, that's not.
Yeah, go ahead.
We do, actually, we have been able to, what we'll do is we'll hire a company that is qualified by the state to run a lottery. We did that down on 4B.
On Beale Street.
On Beale,
as well?
yeah, the condominium down there. So we can do that internally. We've actually talked about working with our housing authority in town, and hopefully in the next year, we're going to have a little more success in working with the housing authority as well. So, but there is a statewide list as well, and that's why you'll see folks that are outside the town.
How much money do you have available if a property came on the market that you wanted to buy? Do you have any money available?
Right now?
No.
So you need to replenish the
We do.
bank account?
Can you just tell me about this? The last line of your first page, where if your bullet points of items that add up to the 878
Sure.
is $182,000 for the repurchase of Ridgewood Crossing affordable unit. Can you just explain why the Housing Trust has to repurchase that? I thought that once a unit was affordable, it got sold through that process you described, and that there was an agency that oversaw the transaction.
That one, I'm afraid, I am not able to speak about because I had to recuse myself for professional purposes. What I will say is this, is that a property that has been designated as an affordable unit in town, then there is a process that you go through, whether it's a right of first refusal or whether it's an absolute option to buy. But it's still, you're purchasing it back, and then we would then put it back out on the market as an affordable unit. Is
So
that,
it can't be sold directly from one affordable owner to another affordable owner?
depends upon what the affordable housing restrictions are that are recorded at the Registry of Deeds that went into the initial package.
So do all the affordable units in Hingham have to go
Different.
through the Housing Trust to be sold?
No, because you, for instance, you have properties that are managed by the Housing Authority. You have properties, for example, the properties down at the shipyard that are designated as affordable.
So this could be a 2-day, you could buy it and sell it immediately, given the
With
wait
the
list.
restrictions, right. You see, what you'll see is the affordable housing restriction is recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So no matter what you do with that property going forward, it has to comply with those restrictions.
Right, but it sounds like
However, there are
there's so
some
much
properties that
need.
we have the option to buy or the right of first refusal.
And restriction covers resales.
Restriction covers resales.
Yep.
So,
Right,
for example,
So for the $182,000, you wouldn't, what does that cover?
so that's, the state, DHCD actually designates what the resale value is for a one-bedroom, for a two-bedroom, for a three-bedroom, for a four-bedroom. The 182,000, is that the three-bedroom?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the three-bedroom. So, for example, once we get Road Circle up and fixed up, and we're probably going to be condominiumizing it, because that's really the only way to divide up the property to get it sold as individual units, we will only be able to sell that unit for $182,000.
Right.
And the same with the other one. Now, let's say we paid $500,000 for the property, we're putting $170 into it, depending upon whether we get the grant or not. We try to crunch these numbers ahead of time, so that we know that we're not going to be paying any more than $150,000 for an affordable unit, one affordable unit in town. And what we're finding at the Trust is that is a very challenging level here in Hingham.
Right,
But we've been successful.
And that's why you apply to CPC for funds.
Yep.
It's not a private enterprise.
Right.
It requires
This is not a business.
Right,
You wouldn't approach that
right.
as
You're
a
not
business.
flipping houses, so to say, and
Right.
getting a margin out of it.
Right.
I think it would be helpful to supplement this information with some fund accounting or something, that just shows for an example of some of the properties is, this is what the purchase price was, this is what CPC funds went to do, this is what we sold it for, this is kind of the net cost to the town.
I actually did that on prior presentations to the CPC. I've done it to the Board of Selectmen, I've done it to advisory. We certainly could, the Beal Cove one was a great example. Except it was a one-bedroom condo, and there's just not a big market you don't get a lot of applicants for one-bedroom condos. But when we bought it, we had to put a little bit of money into it. We sold it. It cost the town $50,000 to create that unit. So that was a win-win.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing the same thing when we get to Road Circle. We'll be doing the same thing when we get to Cushing. Cushing, I think we paid $549,000 for that property.
So, following on that, are these numbers that you show here the anticipated net cost to the town, or are they your cash flow requirements?
I'm not sure what numbers she's talking about.
Here's a list. It kind of shows how you would use the $878,000 in the Opportunity Fund, 100 to Habitat for Humanity, 100 to 4099 Cushing. I'm just saying, is that a cash flow amount, or is that going to be the net cost to the town?
That's a cash flow amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cash flow amount, because then what you'll do, for example, let's say that we've got $100,000 to support Habitat for Humanity, who's hopefully going to be putting 2 units up on Whiting Street. The property was gifted to us, but was actually gifted to the town as part of the original 40B on Derby Brook up there. So we got that property basically for free, which is great. So that means our basis is real. We're really ahead on that one. So then whatever monies, we've already put monies into the property for design purposes, for maintenance purposes, things of that nature. And then we've also agreed to help Habitat for Humanity, but because they're going to be building these properties, the net cost to the town won't be $100,000 in the end.
Right.
So that money will return to the Affordable Housing Trust and again be used for other affordable units, opportunities.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? And it may have already been answered. It sounds like this year is kind of a year of catch-up rather than money in the till in case something comes up that nobody knows about yet. Is that right?
It is, but we hope it's both. In the end, we hope it's both, because we are hopeful that we'll be getting monies in for a grant. And if not, if we get it for this grant, then maybe there's another one out there. But and that's the great thing about this town is we now have the Land Use and Development Department, which is basically Emily Wentworth, helping us with it. So we have, as opposed to us volunteers like you folks, are all volunteers. How much can you do? We now have some actual paid folks helping us search out other sources of funding, and not only that, and better ways to skin the cat, so to speak, to develop the properties.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments from anybody? Jim?
As a long-term member of the Housing Authority, I'm just amazed.
Jim, you just need to bring the mic closer to you.
Oh, sure. As a long-term member of the Housing Authority, where we have a custodial role maintaining what we have and not much opportunity to develop, we're very both envious and very proud of what you're doing, because it's been, in the time you've been around, you've been very inventive and very creative, and you both should get a big shout on your forehead.
Very kind of you, Mr. Watson.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks.
Good night, folks.
Next up is the Canterbury Street Cemetery. Andrea Young is going to be presenting on behalf of the Historical Commission. Okay.
I am here on behalf of the Historical Commission to present our application for the Canterbury Street Cemetery Gravestone Cleanup Assessment and Conservation Project. The Canterbury Street Cemetery was first discovered in 2001, and actually it was when the Canterbury development was going in on Canterbury Street, and that's when people first became aware of it. It was Susan Murphy and I who talked about the fact that this was unfortunate, that there was an abandoned cemetery that really needed care. To that end, we did a cleanup with using Eagle Scouts at one point, but that was before it got to be really bad in there. So we're at the point now where the cemetery has deteriorated considerably since 2001, and the town did acquire the cemetery on October the 9th. Actually, the selectmen voted, pursuant to an article from last year's town meeting, that they would acquire the cemetery. They also voted that the board authorized the Historical Commission and the administrator to oversee the cleanup and historic restoration of the Canterbury Cemetery. So where we are now is that we have determined there were two heirs, actually, to the property that we discovered after going through probate and records and after a long period of time. Both of the heirs, one is in Pittsfield, New Hampshire, and the other is here in Hingham. Neither had any idea that she was the heir to this cemetery. They knew of it because they played around it and played there when they were children. But Mrs. Metcalf moved up to New Hampshire, and Sarah Lovett stayed here. But neither knew that they were heirs. You can see, thank you for those of you who were able to make it to the cemetery. I really appreciate it, because I think it's something you really have to see to understand how detrimental time has been to this little family burial plot. So the cemetery, where's the pointer? Well, I can't find the laser pointer right now, but that's okay. It's on the left, where you can see Rockland Street intersecting with Canterbury.
I think this one.
Hey, thanks.
Yep.
Yep. All right, Mike knows all. Oh, I'm sorry, got you right in the eye. Gonna laser his eyeball. So there it is. It's about 0.75 acres. And as you can see, it's smack dab in this development. It is its own property now. But it's pretty much hidden from view. So those of you who did see it know that it's not visible really from the street. It used to be, but not anymore. This property was established on family-owned pasture land, and that was pretty typical. The earliest visible grave marker is from 1827, but there are stones that suggest that there may be earlier graves from even the 1700s. As I said, it's 0.75 acres. It contains the graves of 5 adults and 10 children, representing 3 generations. It's currently the only known family cemetery in Hingham, and it is important to us because it contributes to the genealogical and social history of the town. Here's the chain of ownership from Henry Barnes, who was the last of the Barnes. He sold the property to Margaret Sprout, and then it eventually ended up with Sarah Lovett, William B. Sprout, and Lucia Metcalf. Mr. William B. Sprout III passed away. So the remaining 2 in purple, they were the winning property owners. This is a cemetery as of March 2001. You can see in the back there's a little fence that surrounded the property. It was just a simple split rail fence, and most of the stones at that point were upright and visible. You could even read them. The other thing that's important about this is that these gravestones are not only mark the graves, but they also contain some significant gravestone art, which is very important. Now, as we look at it, this was in April 2019, this is earlier this year, and you can see that the stones are broken. Some are knocked off their pedestal. Some need to be righted. But the tragic thing is that there are so many fragments that are embedded in the ground, as well as many of the stones are sinking, which is what happens to a cemetery over time if it's not cared for. So here we have just another picture of current conditions. So what the estimates that we received to work on the project, the cleanup and monitoring of the project with the consultants would be $6,500. That would be their share, because the property can't be just cleaned up without someone watching. In fact, I had asked Randy, our DPW superintendent, to factor in a training for the people who are going to be working in the cemetery so that they understand what they need to do if they find pieces of gravestone or something that they can't recognize. So the cleanup and removal and repair of the stone wall in front, and also being able to gain access. For those of you who did climb up there, it's not easy. I mean, you can get there, but it would be a lot nicer if there were an easier access. So that will cost $12,964. And then the second portion would be the condition assessment of the gravestone, and a very detailed report and a triage. And then the gravestone conservation phase 1. So that means, I have no idea what that means, how many they'd be able to do for that amount of money. It depends on how badly things are affected. So we're asking for $40,000 this year, and it is my intent to seek other funding for Phase 2 and other future endeavors. I'm hoping not to have to come back here. There are opportunities out there, so, but they just didn't coincide timing-wise this year. So anyway, and the good news also is that the selectmen did vote to put $1,200 in the Historical Commission budget for annual maintenance. So that is a spring and fall cleanup. So that's it. And so I hope that you will be able to support this in some fashion. Okay, thank you. All right, we're on to the next one. Mike.
Wait.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, I'm doing two, so I
Questions?
Questions?
I guess my question is, if you don't get 40,000, is there a number that you're really looking for that could last a year?
You know, I don't even know that because the condition is so bad. I would say perhaps just, take out the 12 for any conservation work. At least we'd be able to know what was there and have it cleaned up, which is really critical because we can't do anything without it being passable.
Other question? Do you have a sense of how much would be required for a later phase of conservation? Is that the bulk of it, or?
I doubt it. I think there's much more because there's so much. Right now, there are approximately 10 trees that have fallen and need to be removed, and there are some others that need to be trimmed back, and other sorts of overgrowth.
Like the gravestones actually covered by fallen
Yes,
trees?
exactly. So who knows? We do have and I think in your initial packets, your application, there was just a list of all of those who are buried there and kind of laid out linearly, it was parallel to Canterbury Street. So that gives you an idea. But again, one of the consultants said initially that they were small granite stones that may have been very early stones from the 1700s. So that's all of what they have to find out.
Well, Andrea, I know we heard in the Benjamin Lincoln statue application that proponent has been granted $75,000 from the Historic Commission fund. Would there be funds available for this project in that fund? Or have you asked?
Well, it's the Greenbush Historic Preservation Trust.
Oh, so that's...
So it's governed by particular rules, and this particular property would be outside of the area that would be covered by that.
Okay. And as far as this type of cemetery, there are several. I know this is the only family cemetery in Hingham, but there are other small cemeteries throughout Hingham. What is their financial model, and how does your anticipated kind of long-term plan for this compare as far as funding goes for those smaller cemeteries?
Well, let's see. There are no town-owned cemeteries with the exception of this newly purchased or acquired cemetery. So everybody has its own board, and Larry can speak to that, Gary can speak to that, and there are various, they're operating with various funds, levels of an endowment that is lasting in perpetuity. So depending upon which cemetery it is, whether it's, I think probably the one that is in most difficult situation right now is Fort Hill.
This cemetery is in a more difficult situation than Fort Hill.
That is true. That is true.
You have no lots to sell.
No lots to sell.
You have
yes.
no income to generate.
Yep.
Your conservation phase, gravestone conservation phase 1 will cover the stones that you're aware of, that X many adults and X many children. It probably won't cover what hasn't been found yet, but that's a good start. And the 1,200 annual maintenance, that's good.
That seems
for something
that seems adequate
for
once it is cleaned out.
That's my only question, and I asked you when I was visiting visiting the site, is obviously there's a homeowner that is right there and
Right.
is about to have a very visible cemetery in their yard. We're not going to be building fences or walls or
correct.
anything. So they understand that pretty soon they're going to have a visible cemetery in their yard. And they're fine with that.
They have, the consultants that were out there in order to prepare the estimate to do this work, happened to meet that particular homeowner. And so they made him aware that there was work potentially going to be done on the cemetery. He was very glad. However, my plan, and I have not had time to contact him yet, but I plan to do that, to write him a letter and ask what his family's wishes are in terms of, do they want a buffer? What would they like to see? I mean, it's so overgrown now that there's an opportunity to make it so that if he prefers not to look at it, he doesn't have to. I think that's a good idea.
Step to take before we're all for cleaning it up so
I
well
agree
that
with
all of
you.
a sudden he has a cemetery in his backyard.
Right.
Nice to hear.
Or front yard, as
Or
it were.
front yard, as it were, right.
Andrew, could you explain the urgency, if any, of acting now? I know you mentioned sinking headstones and trees falling and breaking headstones. Can you explain, if there is an urgency, if we have limited funds, what's the urgency to act now at this site?
I explored that with the consultants who are actually, they have, they're notable in the field of graveyard repair, and Gary can attest to that. And they said, you know, every year just adds a chance that something else will disappear. Plus, there are, and I think Vicki saw too when she was there, and I forgot to empty it out of my trunk. I picked up a bunch of garbage, beer cans, you know, booze bottles. So people are in there lunging around, and so it's just a concern. Further damage. Now is the opportunity that, well, this is the first time we've really had an opportunity. Town meeting supported it. The advisory committee has supported the article last year. The selectmen are all for it. We've got money in the annual maintenance for annual maintenance. So I feel like, to hold it off another year, I don't know. It's not going anywhere. That's for sure.
Doesn't look any better.
Well, it is going somewhere. It's going down.
Yes, it is. That is true. Yeah.
And the stones are going to be in worse shape in a year than they are.
Yeah. I mean, people stomping through there, and they don't know what they're stepping on, so.
In the future, I would refrain from saying trunk of the car and cemetery in the same sentence.
Yeah, it was my bag of trash.
Other questions or comments? Okay, Andrea, you're up for the painting of the tree and park barn.
Yes.
Michael set you up.
Thank you, Michael.
Andrea, thank you for sticking up for that forlorn son.
Oh, well, Susan is a buddy in this, so a lot of people are interested, so thank you. I know, you can't see it. Okay, so you get to listen to me again. Now, I'd like to introduce Dick Orr, who's sitting over there. He is would you like to come and join me? Then you can. Mr. Orr is currently leasing the building and has for how long?
8 years.
Really?
8 years, incredibly, yeah.
Wow.
I
That's
just
a
thought
long.
that up before I came here this evening. I thought it might be asked.
I'm
years.
glad.
So it's been wonderful. I'm a furniture maker, and I lease the tree and park barn from the town. It's worked out very well for me. Aren't you nice? Thank you. And
Yes.
it's worked out really well for me, so thank you.
So, one of the things that, let's see. Oh, wrong one, sorry. All right, so there she blows, the tree and park barn. Built pretty much around 1857, although some estimates are more closer to 1860. But nevertheless, it's a lovely structure in a very prominent location. Go ahead, Dick.
I had done a little presentation for the Rotary Club.
Oh, good.
And so I'd done a little research on the building. It's kind of interesting. It was originally built as a schoolhouse, was on the far side of the cemetery, and it was moved to where it is now in 1897. They knocked out the front, put in the big swinging doors, and it became the central fire station.
Very good.
And
That's
then-
my next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. He's got it. That's fine. So the only thing that you didn't mention was that it housed the World War II Rationing Board in 1940, from 1942 to 1946. So it's really had a lot of uses, and for that reason, it's historically very important to the town.
As a matter of fact, there's many medical stretchers still in the upstairs. I think I counted about 35 of the big canvas stretchers from the war.
No, maybe we should donate those. So, architecturally, it has significance because it's a beautiful example of an Italianate building. Rectangular in shape, with the gable end to the street. There are coins that delineate the corners. There's an oculus, a round window located in the front gable, and brackets support the eaves. The sash is 6/6, double hung, recently restored by Mr. Orr.
With the help of the committee.
And the elegant Queen Anne bay doors were added, as Dick said, to accommodate the horse-drawn fire department vehicles when it was a fire station. So, there we go. So you can see, unfortunately, it is really deteriorating. And some of the architectural elements are really showing some wear and potential for loss. This is an example of one of the windows that Dick restored. And so, concern is that, again, is this something that has to be done this year? Well, it's in bad condition. It'll just get worse, exposure to the elements like anything else that's left unattended. But the other concern is that it will have an effect on the beautiful restoration work that Dick has already done with the windows, because there's nothing to keep the elements out of the wood. It was last painted in 2013 and began peeling within a year. It was a terrible, terrible paint job. I don't think they really scraped that much. Plus, I think those of you who maybe saw it at the time, the colors were not correct, even though they were spec'd out. And the shutters were painted a bilious shade of green. So those were the only things that were repainted, the doors and the shutters, to what is really an Essex green, which is what it was supposed to be. So Dick has recovered many of the elements, architectural elements that have fallen off, and he has...
you get a gust of wind and you can hear things clattering out in the driveway, pieces of molding they're blowing off. And so weather's getting into the rafters, up on the second story. And you get a good rain, I get water in the basement, but also you get dripping then upstairs. And I think it's not the roof. I think it's a result of the fascia boards have come off, and therefore when you get a good gust of wind, the water goes in underneath the roof line and then comes in upstairs.
So, fortunately, Dick has saved everything that he could, and it's now in that little garage next to the building. So we have an estimate. We have a single estimate, which Jeff, our maintenance supervisor, obtained for us from the company that recently painted the dome on the top of the town hall here, and he was very pleased with their work. And I explained to the group at the time, when we went on the site visit, it's my understanding that we can't get a more specific breakdown, because if they give you a detailed bid, then they can't bid on it, because they're essentially identifying all the specs. So, anyway, we have a bid document from the first time around, so it's easy to write those specs again. And so the estimate is for $45,000, but that's because they really haven't had an opportunity to determine how badly damaged some things are or how rotted something is. And so this includes repairing the clapboards and scraping and caulking and painting and reattaching some of the fallen elements. So it could be less. Jeff thinks this is a little bit high, so I'd rather be able to return money if granted any at all. So there we have it. Dick, anything more?
Oh, no, that's wonderful. Thank you.
My question is, I would assume we have the name of the last painter, and we don't allow him to bid on it?
Yes, we do. Thank
Okay,
you very
good.
much.
Good
Yeah.
plan, so that his bid doesn't come in as the one we
And
choose.
Someone had asked the question at one point, Mr. Orr pays rent every month, and why isn't the rent money being used to paint the building? And the simple answer is that, right, it's been going into the general fund, and there's no appropriation. So when I introduced that, no appropriation for the purpose of painting. So when I mentioned that during my budget meeting, the town administrator and assistant town administrator were willing to consider that. So there's a possibility that that may happen in the future.
Right, and so on that point, because I'm notated in the minutes as saying, and as Dick knows, I was his project liaison for the windows, which is several years back.
And thank you so much. You were so much.
Thank you very
so
much. I
helpful.
wasn't really looking for an applause, but
No.
that's all right. Thank you anyway.
No, you're wonderful,
The
though.
purpose of my question was, I asked the same question at the same time, and we were told that money had gone into a boiler, so it wasn't that money wasn't being used for the facility, but your answer this time seems to mean that they have been putting it in the general fund. So to me, it is something that the committee should be looking at, is if there's money that's come in from rent and they haven't been using it toward the maintenance of the building, it seems like that certainly something this committee should be asking about.
Well, as part of the lease agreement, Mr. Orr does all that's necessary to be done to maintain the building, with the exception of painting, of course, and purchasing a boiler.
Major.
So
expenses.
some of the major expenses are the town covers.
Yeah, on the last lease go around, Vicky, on that boiler, it just that came up because the one there is mighty shaky, so I just asked if that could be focused on, and so that's just in the lease that the town would, in the event it croaks, so they'll put in
That is, okay.
What is the rent per month?
the rent and taxes, it's $1,600 a month.
Okay, so we went over these numbers at the meeting last month, and I thought it was $1,400. So let's just pretend it's $1,400. So $1,400.
I probably misspoke, Larry.
That's okay. I'll make it easy. I promise I'll make it easy. If it were $1,400 a month over 6 years, that's over $100,000. So $1,600 a month is even more over $100,000. And the boiler was how much? Maybe $5,000, $10,000. So that's a lot of money paid to rent the building over 6 years. And I hear you, it went into the general fund. One of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with as we try to spin straw into gold for all of the projects is wrapping our heads around the idea of maintenance as opposed to restoration or historic preservation.
May I address that?
Yeah.
Under the Community Preservation Act, if you paint the entire envelope, that is preservation. If you piecemeal it and just do repairs, that's not allowed and cannot be funded.
Okay, that's good to know. I still feel...
By the entire envelope, you mean the entire building?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you were to
be operating under your regular budget in the town and there were no CPC, where would those funds come from, since that's a town asset?
That would be a question for the town administrator. I don't know.
Other questions, comments?
I guess just a minor one. Do you have any painting or portrait of the original facade that could be mounted inside? Because whenever I go by there, I think, well, it's a fire station now, but it wasn't always looking like a fire station.
Yes, actually, there are photographs of the school.
So after everything else, when you have the celebration of the paint job, you might
Hey,
display that
Yeah.
picture.
yeah, Jerry Duff has quite a file of
Yes, she does.
photographs.
Yeah. So I guess, unfortunately, Larry, they haven't been saving up for a rainy day.
Yeah.
So it is what it is now, and unless there's a change made.
Yeah, this isn't a rainy day.
No.
Painting happens. So,
That's
okay.
right.
But I appreciate where you're coming from.
Thank
Other
you.
questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody in the room want to bring up anything about one of the projects that we haven't talked about? Okay, would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded? All in favor? Aye. Yay. Thank you. See you tomorrow night.